attendance form. You too. No, did you know, starting from today.
Nothing gives prizes for the cahoots. Also get cahoots.
You know, listen. When Emily's the course instructor, she will implement all these brand new changes that you just talked about.
Yeah, should I retake it?
Yeah.
I had spicy tofu and chicken today.
Yeah, I also did, and I hardly survived. That's why I put it on.
What like the cranberry Oreo cookies?
Oh, it's a pretty.
Emily will use her own money to buy us prizes for.
Sorry, I'm just checking for something.
Don't we have a little Android thingies?
Yes.
Yeah, we can give those away.
Yeah.
Yes.
We got this.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. So some announcements. The hack challenge has officially kicked off. So hopefully you guys have met up with your groups and have come up with some ideas for what you want to do. Please use Android Native for the hack challenge. Jetpack Compose is a great skill to have when we're actually doing Android development, but here, because the class was taught, most of the class was taught with Android Native, we want you to display that skill during the hack challenge instead of using Jetpack Compose. If there is enough interest, we'll consider adding Jetpack Compose into the rubric. Keep in mind, you will not have as many resources available if you choose Jetpack Compose, which will make it more difficult for you guys. So, today we are talking about recomposition, right? And what it is. So, what is recomposition? Well, Jetpack Compose does not rely on click listeners to change the UI. We went over this last time. There is on-click events, however, they will never directly interact with the UI. A button press will never directly set, or can never directly set, the text value in a text field, for example. However, we still have a way of responding to a user input and then changing the UI accordingly, right? And this is where recomposition comes in, right? So what does it do? Well, first we have an example of what not to do. Here we have some text that says hello, and then we have an outline text field, which you can imagine as something you just fill out. And we have an on change, and then here we have it so that the on change, we set the label of the, we have the label set, what's it called? Sorry. We set the text above equal to name, right? And if you try to change the value of the outline text field, you will see that nothing will happen, right? I'm not going to demo it here, but just know that nothing will happen. And this is due to the fact that you cannot change the underlying text by doing this, right? Instead, we have something special called live data, right? And here, whenever these values are changed, the UI will automatically update accordingly, right? So it makes it a lot more efficient, quick, and easy. You no longer have to set the value yourselves. All you have to do is change this mysterious live data, and the UI will update automatically. So the way this works is with states. So one type of live data we have is called states, most oftenly called mutable states. Here we have the syntax called mutable state of, and what it does is make it so that you have this mutable state that you can actually change, and when you do change it, it will update the UI accordingly whenever it appears in a composable. So say for example, this title state existed in my previous text, right? Instead of in text setting it as title, we set it as the title state. And now, whenever we change title state, the UI will automatically update it accordingly. So, this is the way we actually access as well as update the states. It is a simple dot val. So all you have to do is, if you say we want to change the int state here, do int state dot value, and then set it equal to something, and now I set it equal to 5, it sets it equal to 5, right? And if you want to get the value, all we have to do is do dot value again. So in this case, this dot value is being overloaded, or that's the word term? Overloaded? Yes. The dot value is overloaded with two functions, both the getter and setter, depending on how you utilize it. If you do dot val without setting it equal to anything, well, it is a getter, and if you set it equal to something, it is a setter. Now, the key point here, whenever a state value changes, everything in the UI that reads from that state will also be reloaded at runtime. So, when a composable automatically reads information, all you have to do is, again, change the state value. However, we have a problem, right? Say, for example, you change one of the values. Well, it reloads the entire composable, and this can have negative effects, as it can reset the default values, and this is not something that we want. Maybe, for example, we change one thing, but it reloads something else and changes it back to its default value, which is not something that we want. So we use the keyword remember. So now, instead of just having a mutable state, we also make it so that our variable uses remember. So what does remember do? Well, in essence, it stores this object in memory. So now it actually remembers it. Pretty easy to remember. So to break down this line, we have our variable myTitle. The remember keyword, again, remembers its value within the curly braces. And between it, we have a mutable state. So what this is doing, and also the by makes it so that the myTitle acts like a regular common variable instead of a state. So now we have it so that myTitle, whenever it's changed, will act like a mutable state. In addition, it will also remember its state, right? So when I update it, it will change the UI, as well as the fact it will remember what the state was, right? So if someone else tries to change it, or someone else reloads the page, it will still remember that at this point in time, it is default title. So if we want to actually read the live value of myTitle, all you have to do is reference myTitle. So here, for example, you want to change the text field, text equal to myTitle. Well, all we have to do is set text equal to myTitle, and whenever myTitle changes, so will the composable. And the composable will update accordingly. Next, we have flows. So, flow is like a constant stream of data. Data can be sent down flows from a source and then read somewhere downstream from multiple locations. So most often you're using this when you're waiting for an asynchronous response. So that could be loading from local storage, that could be from the backend, that could be an expensive operation, right? And here is an example of flowing. So we have iterate flow, and we use this collect method, right? Here we collect the data from iterate flow, and then whenever it does, the body will, whatever is within this body will execute whenever this data is sent downstream, right? So basically, you're waiting for data to be passed in, and then once it is, the flow will pass it downstream, and then whatever wants to actually catch this data will get it, and then it will execute accordingly using whatever it needs to do with this specific data. Right? Now, that was our quick little lecture on states, and now demo time.
Okay. So hopping on into demo, I will be creating a kind of simple app, sort of reminiscent of your homework 2. The ones with the homework with the big box and sliders. I'll make something sort of similar to that. And the speed at which I will make it in Jetpack Compose will hopefully show you that Jetpack Compose is in my opinion, efficient, superior way to develop in Android. So let's get started. So I've made a composable here. Let me actually throw this in the main area so I don't forget. Not on the right hands on the keyboard. Circle maker, there we go. Okay, so now let's start creating this composable. So I'm going to start off with a column, basically just like a linear layout, and I'll make it fill the entire screen. The only thing I need to do is call fill next size. This. Which one? This one. Yeah. Cool. So this will make the column fill the maximum size in whatever container it's in, and I can say give it a background with a color of, we'll go with white. And so I can develop a little bit easier. I'll put the app preview annotation there and rebuild the app so that my column will hopefully show up here once it builds. Give that a second. And I guess in the meantime, okay, there we go. We can see the preview actually showing up. So we can start off by giving this sort of header title thingy. So we can do that with the text composable. And I have to choose the one that's super long and goes off the screen. Give it a text attribute. I'm going to call this circle maker, and you'll see why. We'll give it, we'll actually want to center this in the middle of the screen most likely. So in order to do that, we just throw the horizontal something, alignment attribute onto this guy, and put on alignment dot center horizontally. There we go. Let me format that so it stops going off the screen. So now this should be centered horizontally, and we'll give it a good font size, which is in unit SP, which I also have to import. There we go. Now let's refresh that very quickly, see what that looks like, at least to start off. And there we go, we have a nice little circle maker here. I'll just add a little padding on the top of there. And I can do that again very simply by just adding a little padding attribute. Very quick and easy. Okay. So now that we have our text, let's create a sort of like a box for our app that we can change the color of and make into a circle, as we'll see. So we can do that with a surface. The surface in Jetpack Compose is just a very simple, it's a very simple composable that's basically just meant to be just an object, just something, just a box, pretty much. And so this is pretty much perfect for our purposes. Choose the one that goes off screen. That's always the best decision. So for surface, we'll probably want to give it some amount of size so it knows how big the surface should be. I'll say fill half the max width, let's say. Fill half the max width as possible, so I can do that by adding a 0.5 to that. And I'll force the aspect ratio to be 1. And so this should, let me also give it a background because I think it's by default white. So we can at least see it. R.color dot say black. And reformat. Let's see what shows up. Okay, well, didn't quite show up as black. Oh, I think I know why. There's a color attribute in surface that is the preferred option over background. So let me use that instead. Put a little bit of a color there and delete the background. Try that again. And hopefully now we'll see a black square popping up, not quite a circle yet. There we go. Popped in right in time. And okay, so now the next thing we'll probably need are a couple of sliders. So the first slider I'll make is a little bit different from the one you saw on homework. there'll be a slider for changing the sort of the shape of this surface. So the more I drag the surface, the more rounded this surface should become, or the more I drag the slider, the rounder the surface should become. And well, obviously I'll want to make a slider for that. So there is a slider composable built into Jetpack Compose. I don't think this takes in a body. And this requires a couple of different attributes, I believe. You need on-value change parameter and a value parameter. We'll see exactly why we need those in a second, but just to start, I will throw in a couple of attributes here. So let's say I fill 8/10 of the max width and give it some padding on the top. Just why not? And maybe I'll label this with text above that says radius and has a little bit of a padding on the bottom, say. Actually, I'm changing the padding on the top here to be very large, and then the padding on the top here to be very small, something like 8. And okay, this slider still needs values for parameters, or parameters for value and on-value change. For now, I'm just going to leave those kind of blank or default. And on-value change is a function that will operate when the values change. I'll just leave that blank for now, an empty function that doesn't do anything. Just so I can at least run it. And well, I probably should have launched the preview, but we'll see in a second as it pops up on my emulator. It should render the preview as there is function. Yeah, there we go. So there we see our little text, or our little slider plus our text. My emulator's on this other screen. Let me drag it over. There we go. And so now we have our slider, and of course I don't really expect it to do anything, but something that may even be a little strange is that if I attempt to drag this around, it doesn't actually do anything. Nothing moves. And this is very against what you might expect if you were from developing from Android Native, because even in Android Native, if you say don't set an on-click listener for your slider, you should at least still be able to drag it around. And well, the difference is, I guess the developers or the creators of Jetpack Compose assumed that you yourself would handle the sliding, the sort of sliding logic with this parameter right here, the value 0.5f. So the value 0.5f is, or the value parameter in general, is constantly, so you can think of it as constantly being updated with the value of the slider that will tell the slider what progress to put the slider on. And so right now, it's just basically just hard-coded as 0.5f, and so I can't really drag it around. But if you see here in our on-value change, let's see what happens if I try to, say, do a log statement for our on-value change. This is a float. I'll do that 2 strings so I can actually print it out. Run that, open up our log tab, just like you would in native. Debugging is just as important in Jetpack Compose as Android Native. And I think that's going. Oh, I could test. There we go. So you can see as I actually drag it around, the slider, the slider on value change function is actually updating with pretty much the proper values. You can see if I drag it to this end, it will start printing 1. If I drag it to this end, it will start printing 0. And so the function here is actually working, but the slider itself does not visually update unless I tell it to. So let's say I'm a newbie Android developer or a newbie Jetpack Compose developer, and I say, oh, well, whenever I want this function to change, I'm just going to pass a variable here and then put that variable into my value. So let's make a sort of R for radius progress, and let's just set that to 0.5f to begin with. And then let's put that here. Radius progress. And obviously we would need to set it in our on-value change. Radius progress equals int. It again is just basically the parameter that's being passed into on-value change. I should probably call this something like radius. Be a little bit more intuitive. But anyways, let's see what exactly happens. So at least the logic is I have made a variable that will hold onto the progress, radius progress, and whenever this variable is updated, I hope that the slider value will be updated. But I mean, you could probably guess that it's not going to work. And this is because Jetpack Compose doesn't recompose on every single variable. You have to essentially tell Jetpack Compose which variables you want your UI to recompose off of. And so that's where the funky syntax with by, remember, mutable state of stuff comes into play. So I'm going to type all that out. By, remember, mutable state of, and then my default value, which will say 0.5. Now this will always give you red squiggly lines. You just have to import like 30 things. So I'm going to import once. It'll probably still give me an error. Import twice. Import twice. Okay, cool. 2 imports. But yeah, don't fear if it has a red squiggly line. Usually it just takes a little while. But okay, now with this one simple change, you can see that everywhere where I use radius progress, it doesn't actually change at all. And that's because of this by keyword. By, you can think of it as treating this variable here, radius progress, anywhere that it is in your code, it'll treat it just like a regular column variable, instead of this weird, funky, mutable state of stuff. It'll basically, behind the scenes, call dot value on this mutable state whenever you're trying to get, and then call dot value when you're trying to set. But for all intents and purposes, whenever we use this syntax as developers, we can just sort of assume that this works like a regular variable. So with that one changed, let's see what happens. So if I attempt to drag my slider, it actually starts dragging around. And this is because I'm using a mutable state, which basically tells Jetpack Compose that I want to recompose off of this variable. So it actually does end up dragging around. Okay, now let's actually make it do what it intends to do. So it's a radius slider, so it's supposed to sort of change the radius of the circle a little bit, or this box, I guess it is right now. So right now we can do that in our surface by, intuitively we can do it by changing the shape of the surface whenever radius progress changes to another value. So basically, whenever radius progress changes, I want to update the radius of this box or circle to the new, latest, most recent radius. So I can do that by, I think that there's a shape attribute, which if I'm not mistaken, should be called shape equals, and I can pass in something called a rounded corner shape. Basically just a shape that has rounded corners. But if I make this radius really high, then it'll start basically rounding it more and more and more into a circle. So I can take this radius progress. This should be a value between 0 and 1. So let's say I want to get it to like 100 dp. I'll say times 100. Wrap this around. Turn it to dot to int, or round to int would be better. And then dot dp. Let's try that. See what happens. It should already be a little rounded, yeah, since our default value is 0.5 f. But if I drag it around, you can see it automatically updates with whatever radius I tell it, which is very cool. And all I had to do in order to say that was sort of specify that it's going to read the value of radius progress. I never had to say, go into the click listener here, or the value changed little seekbar listener, and actually tell it to do that. All I did is set radius progress here, and now anywhere in my composable where I use radius progress, such as this shape here, the corner roundness, I can just reference this variable, and it'll automatically recompose, which makes Jetpack Compose super easy to use and efficient to, super fast and efficient for developers. So next, I suppose I can also show off some more advanced stuff, such as color. So we'll make another slider here. So this is, again, more reminiscent of what you did in your homework. So I'll say make a text for hue, and this seekbar should be corresponding to the hue value. So again, I'll make another variable, hue by remember, mutable state of, and let's say our default hue value, say 0. Should be a value between 0 and 360, I believe. So we'll just set it to 0 for now. And next, we'll have to change our listener here to at least just update hue. So pass in a new hue here. Hue equals new hue, and oh, we kind of need a, well, new hue is going to be a flip between 0 and 1. So you can say something like new hue times 360 dot round to int. And then here we can say something like hue divided by 360f. And well, that's not going to do anything, of course, because I'm never referencing the value of hue. It should at least let me drag the seek bars around, but I nobody really cares about that. Let me make it actually sort of change the color of this thing. So something even cooler about Jetpack Compose is that you don't necessarily need to reference these live data variables inside of a UI component directly. I can basically put this anywhere, and anywhere in this code that hue or radius progress will show up will also be recomposed. So for example, if I make a color variable, I think the function is color.hsv. Yeah, it looks like it. Hue, and for the satin, I'll just pass in 1F right now. Import this guy. Experimental API, just silence that. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I hope this can just be classed into a float. Let's see if that works. I'm not too sure. So this should be the color, and whenever hue is changed now, this color should also rebuild whenever I recompose. It's not just UI components, it's pretty much anywhere that hue is referenced. So now I can go to my shape and actually pass in my color. And this might be a little unintuitive because color is just kind of a color object. If I look at color, it's just a color, it's not like a state or anything. So why is it that this will recompose? I guess I can show it off here. Color is not a state, yet if I reference this color, well, as you can probably see, it does actually change the state, even though color itself is not a state, and all I'm doing is referencing color. Why is that? It's because color is referencing hue, which is a state. So hue is being changed in color, and so color is being changed in surface. So it's sort of this chain of recomposition, or the recomposition makes this sort of chain downwards, where everything that references hue will also sort of be recomposed. And as you can see, it has a nice little effect here. So I can do the same for the sat and value, just to sort of like speed run your homework too. Just to show how much easier it is to create stuff in Jetpack Compose as opposed to native. Let's say 45 minutes here for my sat and value. And I want to put this for my color, sat and value. And finally, I want to go to my sliders here and actually have them operate off of the new saturation. Sat equals just straight up new saturation, since saturation is value between 0 and 1, which is exactly what this seek bar should be returning anyways. And a new value. And we can set value equal to value. And set the values of the seek bars as well to sat and value. Okay, I think I got everything, hopefully. Let's see that, hopefully, in action. Okay, so we have our 3 seek bars now, and well, look at that. I just sped run, I guess this is homework 3 technically, but within maybe like 20 minutes, I've created homework 3 while also demoing. So, all in one screen as well, or all in one column file as well. So hopefully you can actually see the usefulness of Jetpack Compose here. I suppose you could do some other stuff as well, such as changing the seek bar colors. Like pretty much all of that is available to you as well. And so I've pretty much gone and completed this. Let me just pull up the other demo because nobody wants to see me just make like 6 other different references to color in the code. Let's see, where is it? Oh, it's done. Pull that up. Oh wait, I think it's open already. Yeah. That's not right. Oh, it's on this screen. That's why it's not popping up. Drag this over. There you go. Launch this one, which should be a little bit more complete with stuff you probably expect out of a more polished app. As you can see, I was testing homework 5s. Congratulations to whoever did this, it worked. Installing taking as long as ever. Once the preview shows up, yeah. As you can see, a little bit more complete, a little bit more polished. And my hue bar also reacts to the same color, the saturation, reacts to the color a little bit, the value also reacts to the color. So just a little bit of a showcase of the power of recomposition. Again, all of these things are being updated live because of recomposition. All the colors and all the seek values, or all the seek bars are being updated just because of recomposition. And well, that is pretty much the end of the demo. That's pretty much all we have for you. So we hope you thought recomposition was as cool as we did, because it really does cut down a lot on the amount of work that you have to do as an Android developer. No more making a million on-click listeners and having to go back into every single on-click listener for every new component that you make. Recomposition makes it super easy and fast. But yeah, overall that is everything that we have. I guess final little reminder thing. Bonus homework will be coming out soon, hopefully by Wednesday. Details will be released hopefully by then. We are still in the works of making it since such an assignment has not been composed in any other semester, so it's sort of a new thing. But the general idea is you'll be creating either one of your own projects or just one of your own projects from scratch, or recreating a homework that you've seen previously in Jet Micropose. But yeah, otherwise that is pretty much it for lecture today. We'll end a little bit early, 15 minutes ago. But take that to have a good night's rest, hopefully. I know I'll be staying up till like 3 a.m. probably, so I don't know why I'm saying that. Yeah, I don't know, something. Just don't worry about it. But yeah, that's all we have for you today. Thank you for coming.